As a college student, I had grown accustomed to late-night walks home from class. The campus was usually quiet and peaceful, but one evening something just felt different. I had just gotten out of my 10 p.m. intro to business class, and as I turned to make my journey home, something just felt off. I quickened my pace, trying to get home as quickly as possible, but an unsettling feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Glancing over my shoulder, I noticed a figure trailing behind me, just beyond the reach of the dim streetlights. At first, I assumed it was just another student from class, but something about their demeanor just seemed off. My heart soon skipped a beat as I realized that I was being followed. Fear gripped me and my mind raced, desperately seeking a plan of action. I decided to take a detour, hoping to lose my pursuer in the maze of campus buildings. But as I turned the corner into a narrow alleyway, my heart sank. The figure was still trailing me, their presence becoming more threatening with each step. Frantic thoughts raced through my mind as I tried to remember the self-defense that I had learned in a workshop. Adrenaline surged through my veins, sharpening my senses and heightening my awareness of every sound and every movement. Feeling a surge of panic, I broke into a sprint, my footsteps echoing out into the night. The sound of the pursuer grew louder, filling the air with an unnerving intensity. My mind became a whirlwind of thoughts, desperately searching for my best escape route, a place to get away from the clutches of my pursuer. Finally, I had made it to the entrance of my dorm. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my keys, the weight of these strangers' presence bearing down on me. The fear pushed me to act faster, the adrenaline propelling me to unlock the door in record time. I ran inside, slamming the door shut behind me, hoping to create a barrier between myself and the danger lurking outside. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I leaned against the door. But the relief was short-lived. Through the frosted glass of the entrance door, I caught a glimpse of the figure standing just outside the building, their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. It was then that I realized the danger was not yet over. I hurriedly made my way to the front desk, urgently explaining the situation to the security guard. They immediately called campus police, their voices laced with concern as they assured me that help was on the way. Minutes felt like an eternity as I waited for the authorities to arrive. Each second amplified my fear, heightening my awareness of the lingering threat outside. It was as if time stood still, my mind consumed by the grim possibilities that lay ahead. Finally, the flashing lights of a police car flooded the darkness, illuminating the area with a flickering glow. The figure outside took one last lingering look at me before disappearing into the night. The police searched the area, but the mysterious pursuer was never found. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the incident remained a haunting reminder of the vulnerability that we all face. On my first summer back home from my freshman year of college, I picked up a part-time job delivering pizza in a town around 30 minutes away from where I lived. The area, in rural Georgia, is known for having places that are in the middle of nowhere, and the pizza place's whole shtick was that it delivered to even to the most remote areas imaginable within the town limits. I could fill books with the weird experiences that summer, from the call that came from a long-abandoned warehouse to the dog that got excited about the pizza in my hand and accidentally shredded my pants with her claws. But one will always stand out in my mind as the creepiest. It was getting fairly late at night, around 10:30, so I was confident at the time that I would be sent on no further calls before closing at 11. However, someone barely managed to miss the cutoff time, and our clerk accepted their order since they were so close. I was given the address and a single box of hot dough and sent on my merry little way. The first red flag was the driveway, or rather the lack thereof. There was a mailbox but no actual driveway, not even gravel. It was really just grass, and a barely distinguishable trodden pathway that resembled more of a service trail than it did something frequently used. I bumped along, wondering if I was even en route to the place, when I saw a slightly above average sized house coming over the horizon, horribly dilapidated and completely surrounded by overgrown woods. I guesstimated where the rest of the driveway led, and ended up parking in a grassy patch that could have been the walkway just as easily as it could have been the front yard. Headlights aimed towards the porch as per company policy. I walked up to the door, but I believe that calling it a door is generous. It was a door frame, all right, but the door itself was just a large slab of wood, propped haphazardly against the side of the house, barely covering the entrance. This was red flag number 2. The third and fourth red flag were also on the door. This included the A4 sheet of printer paper with the words, "Around back," scribbled in all caps, which was hanging just below the place where somebody had self-engraved the door with the title, Manson Family Ranch. Typically, I would never go around to the back of a house, especially a shady unlit house, and especially at night. However, it was my last drop of the day, and I was ready to get it over with and be on my way home. Against my better judgment, I went around to the back of the house. The door back there was an actual door, but it was covered in both cobwebs and fresh spiderwebs. Clearly, this was a door that had not been used in some time. I found the cleanest area available and knocked. I counted to 45 and knocked again. There were no lights on in the house, and I could hear no movement from inside. I knocked and counted again, and repeated the sequence 3 more times before I was finally creeped enough to decide to return back to my car. As I turned, I finally heard a voice coming from inside the house, clearly agitated, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I tried to knock 1 more time, and as I was counting, I heard something in the woods behind me. It started out as just movement deep in the trees, but soon enough, I could make out distinct running footsteps coming directly towards me through the brush. As I'm standing there, coming to terms with my impending demise, I followed the direction of the noise to the edge of the woods, which is around 15 feet away from me. In the moonlight, I could clearly see the woman who had stepped out. She was relatively old, in her 60s I would guess. She had long blonde gray hair, which was tangled and matted and hung down past her hips. She was in what looked to be originally a white nightgown, but at the time it was dingy and closer to a beigeish brown color. She was absolutely barefoot, and her feet were covered in dirt and what had to be blood, presumably due to the fact that she had just sprinted through the prickly woods, where there was no trail to be seen. I never learned her name, but I still affectionately refer to her as Red Flag number 5. She stopped short when she saw me, and started to shake her head no with her eyes wide. I stood there like a terrified deer in the most messed up headlights ever, as she took a few more steps towards me, reaching out to me finger pointed. Her voice came out way stronger than mine would have at the time when she spoke. You know how southern people can either sound like loving grandmothers or backwoods killers? Well, she sounded like the latter when she drawled. "Oh, no, 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 no. No, honey, no. You get on, get on out of here." I wish I could say that I listened. I ran, I laughed. But I was so in shock at how the events were playing out that my own self-preservation was put on the back burner, while I tried to figure out just what in the Kentucky Fried F was happening. She seemed to realize that I was not moving, even if I could not make my mouth move to ask her what was happening. or even what to do with the stupid pizza in my hands. She looked at me like she could have smacked the heck out of me right then and there, and proceeded to deliver red flag number 6 through 12. "Darling, did you hear me? You deaf or dumb? Young girls like you come out here and then they don't get to leave." So, I finally quit being the dumb person in a horror movie when I realized that this was not a funny little ghost story. This was a 5'3", 116-pound me, potentially being targeted to be robbed or kidnapped, or worse. So I dropped the dumb little pizza, which had serious serial killer toppings by the way, and started running back to my car, which I had stupidly left on and unlocked, as was usual for most of my deliveries. As I neared the car, I heard a slam from behind me, and I looked over my shoulder to see that the wooden door had been pushed over and had fallen into the porch beneath it. As I was closing the car door, an older man was limping down the front steps, waving his arms like an airplane runway attendant at me, calling me a little bee, telling me to get out of the car right now. At a loss for what to do, I called out something muttery and shaky, and along the lines of, "Pizza's out back." I floored my dad's crappy little 90s Lexus and somehow managed to avoid trees on the out trail back to the main road, which was still 12 miles and several turns from any road that actually had a name, let alone painted lines. I reported it to my manager, and he said that he contacted police, but nothing ever came of it that I'm aware of. Either way, that was my first and hopefully last personal encounter with the self-proclaimed Manson Family Ranch. This happened almost 4 years ago. My parents and my husband were visiting my mom's family in Indianapolis. I used to go all the time as a child, but I wouldn't know my way around. I was drinking a lot because my husband had an emotional affair with his ex that lasted 4 months. She tried to break us up. Honestly, I could write a whole post about how she tried to ruin our relationship. So we saw my family and then went back to the hotel. I was upset, so I said that I was going to smoke. In reality, I was going to the hotel bar. I got multiple double vodka shots with a splash of orange juice, and I was feeling good. The bar was closing, so I asked the bartender where there was another bar, and she told me to go to TGIF's. It was about a 10-minute walk. Remember, this was after 10 p.m. and I was already pretty drunk. I went inside and I got more drinks. I don't remember how I got back outside, but I was smoking and there were people outside in the parking lot with me. Suddenly, I was being dragged into a car. I don't know how long it had been. I was so drunk that I couldn't do anything or even realized how messed up I was. During this time, my husband realized that I was missing and woke up my mom in my parents' room, and he tracked my phone to the TGIF parking lot. My mom and husband got to my phone, but I wasn't there. Then my mom saw this man trying to get me in his car. She got out of the Uber that they were in and started screaming to let me go. And this guy thought that my mom was just a stranger trying to save me. He didn't believe her, and I remember her yelling. I only remember him saying, "How do I know she's your daughter?" and something like that. He had grabbed me, so I had bruises on my arm. My mom threatened to call 911, which I was told later, since I was almost in his car. He let go of me and drove off with his back passenger door wide open. I'm convinced that I would have been taken at the very least. I was unfamiliar with the area. I was drunk, and I barely realized how bad the situation was. I was taken to the hospital, checked in. I was released the next day. I didn't hear about what my mom and my husband saw until we got home, since we were driving home that entire day. I'm a mother of 2 daughters and live out in the country. My husband is a welder and a really outgoing and charismatic guy, which means that he has tons of friends that will periodically stop by to hang out with him. In fact, there are some friends he trusts enough to use the tools in his garage and stay at the house when he isn't home. Well, one late evening he was gone when I heard someone pull into the driveway. We have 2 dogs who were going nuts with barking at the picture window in our living room. I looked out and saw a familiar looking blue blazer and assumed my husband's friend, Bob, was over to use something from the garage or to wait for my husband to get home. He hadn't knocked on the door, so I figured they already talked to each other about it. No big deal. But the dogs wouldn't stop barking and growling, which just didn't seem right because they knew Bob. So I looked more closely out the window and realized that there was a man lingering near the garage, but he was not Bob. In fact, I had never seen him before. I decided to take my dogs and go outside to see who he was and what he wanted. He had told me that he lived down the street and that he knew my husband. He was very friendly and began telling me all about how he had to move out of his house because he and his wife were divorcing. He seemed quite familiar with my husband, and even asked about our dog, Pepper, who had passed away a few months prior. Pepper was a very smart and protective dog, and could be scary if he thought harm would come to me or my family. He didn't realize that Pepper had died, and really seemed genuinely apologetic about it. Meanwhile, I noticed that my dog's shadow still hadn't settled down around this guy. He wouldn't let him pet him, and the hair on his back was sticking straight up. And he would intermittently growl during our conversation too. This was really odd for him, and I was pretty confused because this guy seemed really nice. After chatting for a while, he asked for my husband's number so he could call him. That was a red flag for me, because if my husband wanted someone to have his number, he would have given it to them. So I told the man that I would give him a call right then. I called my husband in front of the man, who suddenly looked a little nervous. I explained to my husband that Jim from down the street was at the house to visit him. Immediately, my husband told me to tell Jim to get off our property and to never return. This scared the crap out of me, because like I said, my husband is really friendly and hospitable usually. He told me to make the man leave and he was on his way home. I ended up making up some excuse to Jim. For some reason, I just couldn't say something so mean to him after he had been so friendly and polite to me. And he backed up right away, suddenly quick to leave. My husband arrived home a short time later and explained that Jim was a severe drug addict who had been stealing from all of his neighbors' garages. His wife threw him out of the house because of this, and he's been desperate for cash to support the habit. He was probably scoping out what he could steal from my husband's garage and seeing what obstacles my dogs would be in his way. To think he could have harmed me or my kids, it makes me furious. But he seemed so nice, and I felt like an idiot for not realizing the truth. I've learned my lesson now though. If somebody comes over that I don't know while my husband is out, I just call him right away. Update. My husband told me tonight that Jim was arrested and is currently in jail now. He apparently was caught robbing from my neighbor's garage. Good riddance. I had moved to a new area, and so I was learning my new bus routes and stops to and from uni. I was on my way home late one evening, and as I tapped my card, there was a lady probably in her 60s sitting up front at the seat behind the bus driver. As I got in, she wrinkled her nose up at me. I chalked this up to her maybe being a little old-fashioned, as I was wearing ripped jeans and an AC/DC shirt. But I don't look tough or mean in any way. I was kind of taken aback by her intense reaction, but I soon forgot about it. By the time I pressed the button to call for my stop, the bus driver overshot and missed it, which he realized immediately, and apologized to which I replied, "It's okay, no worries." And he goes to pull over at the next stop further up. The bus was empty at this point, save for a person up in the back and the grumpy one up in the front. As I got up to get off, the older lady turns right around in her chair with the ugliest look and begins to berate me in a loud voice. "Are you stupid? Why would you press that button, you idiot girl? I hope you never drive, you'll kill someone. And you've wasted my time, you idiot." Over and over again. And the bus driver looked back for a second dumbfounded, but he stayed out of it. She had these dagger eyes fixed on me as she just became louder and more angry. And I just ended up avoiding her gaze as I was so confused and intimidated. I was half in shock on how nasty and loud she was being towards me. So when the next stop came, I quickly made for the exit, and all I could say was, "Yeah, okay, cool." She would just lean towards me, almost sticking her face into my shoulder that I felt her brush against me as I walked past. I was freaked out to say the least and darted out the door, and I hear her growl another insult under her voice as the doors close. I hope I never see her again.